Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a deeply consequential and often heavy chapter in American history. We're going to be thoughtfully charting the period of westward expansion, the displacement of Native American nations on the Great Plains, and their enduring resilience. It's a really complex story of explosive growth for some and profound loss for others. Honestly, to truly understand the map of the modern United States, we absolutely have to look closely at these events. To anchor our understanding of this era, let's take a quick look at a timeline of the pivotal events that so rapidly reshaped the map of the American West. What's truly staggering here is just how compressed this history actually is. Over just a few short decades, we jump from the 1862 Homestead Act, which vastly accelerated settlement, straight into the fierce resistance at the 1876 Battle of Little Bighorn. From there, we see the devastating decline of the buffalo in the 1880s, leading right up to the tragic events at Wounded Knee in 1890. This timeline is basically our roadmap for understanding just how incredibly fast life on the plains was altered. Here is how we're going to break all of this down today. 1. Life on the plains. 2. The push westward. 3. Conflict and resistance. 4. Loss of the buffalo. 5. Tragedy at Wounded Knee. And finally, 6. Enduring resilience. Let's jump right into Section 1, Life on the Plains Before Major Settlement. It is absolutely crucial to remember that the American West wasn't just some empty wilderness waiting to be discovered. By the mid-1800s, dozens of Native American nations, we're talking about the Lakota Sioux, the Cheyenne, the Comanche, the Apache, and many others, had long established incredibly vibrant societies. For generations, they acted as the sovereign caretakers of the land and its resources. Their daily lives, their communities, their traditions, they were all deeply interwoven with the geography of the Great Plains, creating a sustainable balance that had literally lasted for centuries. Moving right along to Section 2, the push westward and the resulting competition for land. This whole era is defined by a massive core tension. On one side, you have Native nations with generations of managing the land and relying carefully on its natural resources. But on the other side, you have U.S. expansion, which was characterized by a rapid, resource-driven movement of settlers and railroads. This wasn't some gradual mingling of cultures. It was a sharp, sudden competition for the very land that Native communities had called home for hundreds of years. So how did the U.S. government actively fuel this expansion? Well, they used policies like the Homestead Act to directly encourage thousands of settlers to pack up and move west to claim land. At the exact same time, massive railroads were just carving their way straight across the plains. To make way for this massive influx of people and industry, the U.S. government pursued a really strict policy of confining Native nations to designated reservations. These agreements were formalized through treaties, but as history shows us time and time again, as the demand for land and resources grew, these treaties were frequently broken or reinterpreted by the federal government, constantly shrinking the territory Native nations had originally been promised. Which naturally brings us to Section 3, Conflict and Resistance, as tensions escalated. As you might expect with that kind of mounting pressure throughout the 1860s, 70s, and 80s, tensions completely boiled over. Native nations didn't just quietly surrender their homelands, they actively resisted. And this resistance culminated in widely studied events, perhaps most famously in the year 1876. That was the year of the Battle of Little Bighorn. During this major conflict, combined Native forces, primarily the Lakota, Cheyenne, and their allied nations, achieved a highly significant and historic victory. They decisively defeated U.S. Army troops led by Lieutenant Colonel George Custer. It was a massive, unified defensive stand for their sovereignty, their land, and their way of life. But let's look at how this builds into the broader strategy of the U.S. government. That victory at Little Bighorn in Step 1 triggered a massive counter-response. In Step 2, we see the U.S. military heavily intensifying their campaigns in the years immediately following the battle. By Step 3, the federal government had committed overwhelmingly greater resources, troops, supplies, infrastructure, with the explicit goal of completely subduing any remaining Native resistance across the entire region. The sheer scale of U.S. military power made long-term armed resistance incredibly difficult. Alongside the military campaigns, another devastating shift was happening. This is Section 4, Loss of the Buffalo. To really grasp the impact of this shift, we have to understand that Native American communities on the plains depended profoundly on the buffalo. It wasn't just a convenient food source, it was literally the foundation of their entire existence. The buffalo provided clothing, materials for their homes, tools, and trade goods. Their general survival and traditional way of life on the plains were intrinsically linked to the great herds. But during this period, commercial hunting drove the near total destruction of the buffalo population. We're talking millions of animals killed in a staggeringly short amount of time. Furthermore, historians note that this destruction was actually encouraged in part as a deliberate strategy to weaken Plains nations economically. Without the buffalo, the ability of Native nations to sustain organized large-scale resistance was severely crippled by the 1880s. It was the removal of their fundamental means of survival. And this profound loss of resources, combined with nonstop military pressure and shrinking lands, leads directly into a deeply sorrowful chapter. That brings us to Section 5, Tragedy at Wounded Knee. In December of 1890, a truly devastating confrontation took place at Wounded Knee, South Dakota. During a highly tense encounter, U.S. troops killed a large number of Lakota men, women, and children. It was a horrific loss of life. Historians generally regard this tragic event at Wounded Knee as the definitive end of major, large-scale armed resistance by Native American nations in the West. The era of the Indian Wars, as they were often called, effectively closed with this terrible tragedy. Following Wounded Knee, federal policy shifted drastically, but the pressure on Native communities certainly did not stop. Instead of armed conflict, the government implemented policies of forced assimilation over the next several decades. This included the establishment of Native American boarding schools. These institutions were specifically designed to separate children from their families, suppress Native languages, and intentionally erase traditional cultural practices. The generational impact of these policies was immense, and it's a period whose profound effects are still heavily studied and acknowledged by historians and Native communities today. Finally, we come to Section 6, Enduring Resilience, Survival, and Continuity. Acknowledging these difficult truths, the broken treaties, the immense loss of life, it's absolutely essential if we want to understand the full, honest story of American history. But it is just as vital to recognize the incredible resilience of Native peoples. Native nations did not disappear. Today, they successfully continue to preserve their history, their rich cultures, and their sovereignty. They remain a vibrant, essential part of the fabric of modern society, carrying their heritage forward into the future. Which leaves us with a really fascinating historical pivot. Native nations survived a period of unimaginable upheaval, much of it driven by the country's relentless push westward. But what about the mechanics of that push? What exactly happened to those rapidly expanding railroads we discussed earlier? How did those iron tracks, which played such a massive role in displacing communities, go on to forge a completely new, industrialized era for America? Well, that is a complex and massive shift in its own right, and it is exactly what we'll be exploring next time. Thank you so much for joining me for this exploration.